Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm just talking to George right now. He's having some technical difficulties, so we'll just give it a few minutes here.
Gotcha. Oh, Oreo says hi.
Oh, hey, buddy.
She's about to be adopted.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Hey, George. Looks like you got on okay.
Come on.
Okay, good.
How's everybody doing?
Good, good. How are you?
Good. You know, doing it and running it and going.
Well, I figure if we just give it to like 6:05, just let up.
Sure.
There's people trickling in.
Yep.
Give it another couple.
Hi, Jen.
Okay. Well, I think everyone I was expecting is here, and I'll just keep on letting people in as we go. But I'll just kick it off here. Jolene and I are excited to have you here. George is excited to have you here, and this is our monthly meeting that we're going to be doing for our Ask the Trainer. And it's mostly going to be a Q&A session. But George will also dig into any things that he might be seeing frequently on training requests. We see a lot of the same issues over and over, so those are a really good litmus to know what kind of things many of you might be seeing. Feel free to, I think you can raise your hand on here. You can use the chat. I see that Ginger's listening in. That's great. We can all use a little help from George here and there. So feel free to type in the chat. If I don't see it, you can unmute yourself. I'll just keep everyone muted. If you accidentally unmute yourself, I'll mute you back up just so we can hear. And Jolene, did you have any announcements or anything?
Not that I can think of. We're here for George tonight.
Awesome. So George, the floor is yours.
All right. Hope everybody's doing awesome. Yeah, the big ones that I'm seeing a lot of, the big issues I'm seeing a lot of is one is the having the foster dog come into a home that already has dogs in it. There's been and I've also seen a lot of the same issues like the reactivity on leash, but it comes from a lot of adolescent dogs. Adolescent dogs, when they come into the foster network, they have to start training right away. Again, I always open up with talking about how a lot of these dogs come up with really sad stories. You know, they come up with buckshot and BBs and pellets and just, you know, they come up and they tug at our heartstrings, and it's really easy to fall victim to wanting to baby them and give them sort of carte blanche in your house and let them sort of lead the way. But that does more harm than good in rescue, because what ends up happening is that these dogs are going to eventually be adopted, and we want to make sure that when they get adopted, that they are that they have some good behaviors that they leave us with. And we want to make sure that the behaviors that they leave us with are good behaviors, and not having any nuisance behaviors. That means crate training when you're home and when you're not home, and some basic obedience and manners. Everybody should be playing the games that we have, the videos that we have available. And I'm still waiting on some of the rest of the videos that are going to be coming in for Underdog, which should be coming in shortly, which is more general basic obedience. One of the big things that I always see coming in is, you know, with young dogs especially, is this idea of them being too aroused and too excitable, and they get really rambunctious and they get mouthy. And the big takeaway here that I want you guys to take with you is the idea of arousal training, and that is the tug of war games. A lot of places on the internet say that tug of war is the devil, and it's really not. Tug of war with rules can be a really valuable tool that we have, that we can create what I call synthetic arousal, meaning we're creating the arousal by tugging with them. And what we get the dogs to do is get to a place of arousal. But what do we do with that arousal once we have it? Well, then we jump back into some basic obedience and manners. And the idea of going from arousal to focus is that we want the dogs to be able to go from a place of arousal to a place of focus. And it's that idea of them listening when they're aroused. It's not just them listening when they're calm and they're in a really sterile and a bit of a vacuum of an environment. We want them to be able to listen when they're a little bit nutty and crazy. And that's how we get there. So playing those three, the games that are available now, the It's Your Choice, the Elevator Game, and Chill Out, that creates a place of focus. From there, we're able to introduce the tug of war once they have a bit of understanding, and we go from the arousal to focus and then back to arousal. What we're looking to have accomplished here is what we want to accomplish is the idea of them getting aroused and then being able to ratchet back and get back.
Okay, you guys need to be kind of quiet, please.
Okay, who, me? The big premise here is, again, it's like these dogs when they're young, everything gets them excited and aroused, especially the little pity mixes. So we want to make sure that we're creating this arousal and then getting them back to focus. The other things that the other basic obedience games that can be played are just the games that, you know, that come from the three games, the It's Your Choice, the Elevator Game, and Chill Out. From Chill Out, we teach a down. From the Elevator Game, we teach a stay. And when we're able to introduce these dogs into their potential adopters' homes and we do these meet and greets, it's so much nicer and it's much more appealing when the dogs have these behaviors that they're able to execute and do. And it's the great thing about these games is that they're fast to teach, and once the dogs learn them, we can just forward the videos, and it makes the transition for them a lot easier as well, because they generalize the behaviors. When their new adopted families are playing these same games, the dogs are saying to themselves, oh wait, I know these games. Oh, you know the same games? It makes the transition mentally and emotionally a lot easier for them, because it's something that's familiar to them, and playing these games it's just really great. So first thing you do when you get a foster, start playing these games with them. It's also a nice way to sort of help with decompression, because you're giving them something to do. You're giving them a way to create reinforcing behaviors that they get to feel empowered by, and it builds confidence in these dogs, especially for the dogs that are a little bit fearful or have a little bit of anxiety. Oh goodness gracious, Dolly almost took down the whole system there. She almost took down the whole mainframe. So I'm going to give her
Oh, can I just pop in here real quick?
Of course.
And I think that another really cool thing about the games, and we can talk about when we get all the other videos that George is finishing up production on, or finishing up the editing. We might try to find a place to put them for adopters so that they can be easily accessible without needing to go onto our portal. But the really cool thing about these games too is it helps people bond with their pets. And studies have shown that regardless of the behavior issues that a dog might have or other things that need to be worked on during a transition, if they're creating that bond, animals are so much less likely to be returned. So it's just another great tool for helping people bond with their newly adopted pets. And one other question, George, when you say adolescent dogs, I know any dog can have a high need for a lot of these games and any dog can benefit for it. But when you say adolescent dog, what age are you generally looking at?
I love that question. So puppies, to me, puppies are anything birth to about 5 months old, 4 or 5 months old, depending on the size of the dog. Larger dogs develop physically at the same rate as smaller dogs, but mentally they develop slower. So you can have this large breed dog that, and I always say, like, these large breed dogs get pigeonholed because like people look at them, they see this large dog, they're like, you're a giant dog. Why aren't you acting like more? Why aren't you more mature? But mentally, they're mentally developing a lot slower. So social maturity reaches a little bit slower with larger breed dogs. Smaller dogs, it's a little faster. So puppies to me is anything from birth till 4 or 5 months old. After 4 or 5 months old, they're going into adolescence. They're adolescent up until about 2 years old, depending on the size of the dog. After 2 years old, they're adult dogs. And I get calls like that all the time. They're like, oh, my puppy's giving me a hard time. Like, how old's your dog? They're like 5. I'm like, that's not a puppy. It's not a puppy anymore. It's not even an adolescent. So that definition is really important to have so that we can address the issues appropriately based on what they're able to do, because cognitively they're totally different from week to week, not only month to month, not to mention month to month. So who's got questions? Anyone? If you don't have a question, you can also talk about a specific topic, like, and there's nothing off the table here regarding dog training. I recently attended Kathy Sadeo's little mini clinic on cues, and there's something to be said about Kathy Sadeo. She's just such a brilliant trainer and behaviorist, and I attended her seminar with my first dog CJ ages ago, and the cue seminar that she does, she calls it Q-tips. And they're talking about CUE, not like actually the letter Q. And these Q-tips are so important because we all have different tones, and the cues that we give our dogs can be misleading to dogs. Some of the more basic ones are, a dog's doing something naughty and we say, hey, get over here right now. Yeah, dog will be right over. Right? They're not going to come over if you're barking at them, even though we want them to come over to get them to stop what they're doing. So many of the things that we do and say, we want to be really clear on how we express those. For now, we'll put that on hold and we're going to answer Melissa's question. Melissa, please unmute.
Hey, George.
Hi.
Hey, so I have Bongo still, and I'm ready for either Shy Dog 2.0 or affirmation that it's still slow and steady. So I'll have him for a month on Thursday, and I'm doing, the giving him lots of space and lots of treats when he'll eat them, and, kind of slowly going into the pets. He is still super duper scared. So he's met a couple different people. He typically pees or poos as soon as he sees a person. I've tried twice to take him on a small leashed walk on the street, and we've done just my cul-de-sac. And that's the one time where I still will see him like super terrified, like whine, bite at the leash, really scared. So do I still give him lots of space, or do I need to start pushing him some more?
Yeah, and I always go to the point, like, imagine if you were scared of something,
Mhm.
right? Would you want to be pushed, or would you want space and slow
Yeah.
and patience, right? And it's the same thing for our little furry friends, like we want to make sure that we're giving them that time to sort of acclimate. And even though it's been a month, like, it's all relative. There are dogs that are fearful well into their adulthood, and then there are dogs that are fearful for a very short time. And I sent you the Lauren and Jolene, I sent you the article on fear periods in dogs, right? Was that posted somewhere?
I think that was our last meeting like this, right? And
Yeah,
I
I think
I think so.
it's on the web portal. There's like in the training section, there's like good reads kind of a thing, and you click on that, and I put it on there for you
Okay,
too.
good.
Fear period.
There's something called a fear period in dogs. And how old is Bongo?
He's an adult. He's young.
So 2, 3?
Yeah.
Okay. So, this goes beyond a normal fear period in dogs. And this is also important to talk about too, where, we know what's Bongo's history? He came up from down south, Alabama.
So he was brought up in Texas, but he went to a shelter way up north, like north of Eau Claire. And
Mhm.
then he got adopted out. He was with them for a couple weeks, but he wasn't able to move past that poo and pee when touched. And he just hid in their closet. So then he was returned. And then the shelter reached out to us because he obviously was not doing well in the shelter.
Right. So there was this a very loose study that was done not too long ago, probably 10 years ago, and they tested cortisol levels on a breeder's litter, mom and litter. So imagine a dog that was like raised in a loving environment, plenty of food, warmth, comfort, and happiness all around. Right. The chances are, and we know about this in human mothers, right? They say, don't be stressed when you're breastfeeding, because that stress is inside you, the stress in the womb, cortisol. And it's not just stress, it's the cortisol, it's the chemicals that are created that are created and passed, in utero. And so they did these tests on these dogs. They also did a test on a street dog that was pregnant, and they tested the cortisol levels. And it's no surprise to me that what they found, right? They found that the puppies that the mother that was carrying the litter of, out on the street, those puppies were like obviously full of fear, full of anxieties, aggressions, and all sorts of stuff. And the best way to compare it is, we've heard of crack babies, we've heard of fetal alcohol syndrome, we've heard of, babies born with addictions, we've heard of all these things. And it's why wouldn't it be true for our dogs? And they're still mammals. It's practically the same thing, except they're not ingesting chemicals. So when we think about our dogs in these situations, like, who knows where Bongo came from? He could have been his mom could have been super stressed out. Like, imagine a pregnant mother out on the street trying to find shelter, trying to find food, trying to stay dry, stay warm. Like, there's all these stressors that are happening to this mother. And it's really no surprise that those litter of puppies come out and they're all, a little bit fearful and anxious and possibly aggressive. So in these cases where you have this super hyper fear and you're not seeing dramatic changes based on your household, you have two really chill dogs, Grav makes
Yeah.
Gandhi look aggressive. So like he's in a really loving and warm environment. He's been there for a month and we're not seeing these changes. This is where I would probably call in pharmaceuticals.
So we started last week. I had done trazodone earlier and that wasn't really helping. So now he's on fluoxetine and that'll
Okay.
kick in a couple weeks.
And I think the fluoxetine is like the Prozac, right? Right.
Yeah.
So and that's a low dose. So we got to give it another 6 weeks to see what happens and see if he starts to sort of come shining through.
Okay.
In the meantime, are you seeing any play behavior, any sort of affiliative or social behavior where he chooses to be next to you or he wants to be near you?
So he has one couch cushion that he lives on. And he won't leave that for, our big thing was last week, Thursday, he finally will go to the door for potty by himself. This morning, the big movement was, I was pretty close to him and he moved his nose about an inch to get a scratch. So that was pretty exciting. But
Excellent.
otherwise, if another animal like comes to him, he'll sniff the nose. So like he was friends with Margot the bunny, she would hop up and like see him and he would sniff her back. And like my sister's dog came over today for a bit and like went up to him and he sniffed his nose. But he won't otherwise, like he doesn't follow my dogs around outside. He doesn't do anything like that.
Is he normally cowering and just like following the perimeter of the yard, or is he like just like go outside, park it?
Nope. So we do a loop and he'll kind of do his loop and then kind of dash back and forth to the deck until finally like I'll let him inside.
Okay. Yeah, and so part of this is slow and steady wins the race. And then, you know, we call on the pharmaceuticals for them to work some of their magic. And we want to look for any of these, you know, and this is the other thing about, you know, fearful or anxious dogs too, is I look for naughty behaviors. So stealing food, I actually will leave food like right on the edge on a paper plate so the dog can come and steal it, right? Behaviors that are rewarded that have to do with food are going to be, they're going to release serotonin, regardless if he's fearful or not. Now, the other part of that too is like, this is where I cheat and I will just like order some barbecue and just sort of sit there and feed him brisket, like make you like super valuable. And the idea of doing this is not to spoil him or teach him to beg. It's the idea that we have to sort of tame this little creature. We have to sort of teach him that we are favorable and we are wonderful. And I want you to be very mafioso about it and make him an offer he can't refuse. Like I want, like, use the big guns here, because if he realizes, like, you know, the only food he gets is from you, and think back to cave people days, right? So which feral or wild dogs got fed? The ones that were brave enough to breach the line and go collect food from the cave people. The cave people also had to have been kind enough to realize that, hey, look, these are animals and they're, you know, we can feed them. And the interaction was this symbiosis that happened. Now that's what we're replicating here. We want to just sort of teach him that, like, the best things in the world come from us, the most wonderful things. And, you know,
And I do that a lot. Whenever I go in, because he'll tend to cower, you know, like when we enter the room. And so I picked up, you know, the freeze-dried stuff. So the lamb liver, the whitefish, the salmon. He gets kielbasa. We do chicken breast, all the pepperoni, cheese.
Excellent.
We're not being stingy
Good.
on the treats.
Good.
So
Good.
he won't eat outside though. If he's on his cushion, he'll mostly take treats of our hands, not like 100%. I tried outside though, and he's just too nervous about it.
Have I ever told you about the 4 treat rule, where you give him a few treats if he's willing to eat, then you toss one, even if it's on the couch cushion? The idea is for him to return to you. And I do this a lot with dogs that are a little bit fearful or anxious, where you give them a few treats in a row. It's right to their mouth if they're willing to take it. Then you take a treat and you toss it so that they have to track it and go get it.
Okay.
Now, once they've gotten that treat, they have to come back to you. But the cool thing, that the switch that happens, is that they're approaching you not with the idea of being fearful. They're coming to you for the acquisition of food.
Right.
So that's the shift that we want to make in his head, to say, oh, wow, anytime I approach these 2 people, they give me super yummy stuff. And that's really the step we want to sort of take. You can also take his cushion. Is it on the couch right now?
Yeah.
So take the cushion and bring it off the couch. So he has to come off the cushion.
He will move cushions. I tried making him switch cushions, and he then just is like, okay, cool. You want me to be on this cushion instead?
Well, he'll just move to the next cushion on the couch. Got it. So if you pull his cushion off the couch, he won't stay on the floor on the cushion. He'll just move to the next cushion on the couch. Okay. That's his pace. Bring all 3 off. How many cushions are on the couch? 3?
It's a sectional, so it's a good sized couch, but he's got one, but there was an unfortunate toileting accident that had to be cleaned up. So that's when he moved to his other cushion, and that was the new cushion. But
Yeah, and yeah, with fearful dogs are, and it's funny, if you watch any Caesar Milan or anything like that, and not to talk about aversives and bad technique and bad form, but it's part of the reason he doesn't work with a lot of fearful and anxious dogs, because his techniques won't work on fearful and anxious dogs. The whole dominating and like bullying them, it won't work. It won't work. And this is why the other argument too is, the other argument is like, you should never coddle a fearful or anxious dog. And the reason I poo-poo on that whole theory is that if I have a dog that's fearful or scared, like thunderstorms or whatever, and I cuddle the dog, and that dog shows me physical characteristics of a dog feeling better, then if I was reinforcing the behavior, it would make it worse. It
Mhm.
wouldn't make it better.
Got it.
So it's very much like a crying baby. Give me a fearful dog or a crying baby. If the dog will let me hug it, I'm gonna hug it. I'm gonna hug it, and I'm gonna cuddle it. I'm gonna hold it close. I'm gonna put pressure. I'm gonna scratch. I'm gonna do everything I can to help this dog and alleviate the fear. I'm not gonna try to just sort of ignore it and like not address it.
Mhm.
If the dog will allow the snuggling, snuggle, because that releases hormones, ventral touching. I mean, it's very
Okay.
mammalian, like when we hug, right? It's our hearts. It's our hearts touching. It's like we're hugging, and it's actually your head over left shoulder of the person, and that's the closest hearts can get. And it's the same thing with animals. You see this with chimpanzees. You see this with dogs. I love like Serena Denson and Caitlin Richardson. They post those pictures of all the puppy piles of all their dogs, and Jamie as well. Like all these puppy piles, these dogs, they embrace the warmth. They want that connectivity, and it's not necessarily ventral touching, but it's connectiveness. It's that body touching. So even just if you're sitting there and you put your hand on him and like feel his breathing, feel what happens when you touch him, and then what happens if you're scratching him. Does he try to flee, or does he stay there if you're touching him?
He won't move. He gets scared. So like I've tried the snuggling a couple of times and he goes rigid. But he's too scared to run. The only time that he ever tries to like run from it is like the 2 times I tried to take him on a walk at the gate. That's the only time I've heard him make a noise, when he cried, and like the only time when he like bit the leash. I've never seen that kind of behavior. Like he's uncomfortable if I try to snuggle him, but like no growling, no snarling, like just really rigid and kind of side eye, like,
Yeah.
what are you doing?
Right. And it's that level of fear is just like, especially, and that's the part that always breaks my heart, because it's like when a dog is scared of me, like I'm just like, come on, dude, like it's me, like I'm in the club, like I love dogs.
Oh no,
And
that was the
like,
hardest part. Like the first 2 weeks, it was like every
painful.
time I'd come into the room and he'd like cower. And it's like, I'm literally giving you chicken breast.
Right.
Like, please don't
Yeah,
be
and
scared of me.
it's painful, but the best in a situation like Bongo's, patience and distance and just giving him what he needs to come out of his shell. So like I love those little observations you've made, like he inched an inch closer for a scratch. Like that's affiliative behavior. That's him wanting to be closer to you. Like that's a step in the right direction. And keeping little journals too, because with COVID and like just sort of like we're all in this sort of Groundhog Day repetition and like same thing over and over, especially if you're working from home. It's super important to keep a little journal for Bongo and say like today was the day, like big green check mark, like today was the day he came a little bit closer, he took more treats than he did other days, and making sure that you can see, like I love like red and green for like bad day, good day, and keeping track of that. If you start to see more green than red, we're moving in the right direction.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, keep fighting the fight. I mean, it's fearful dogs are tough.
And
Boy.
I think that if anyone has a real fearful dog in their care, I think it's always a good idea, especially if you're newer, to don't hesitate to reach out and do a training request. Training requests don't just have to be, for reactive or that kind of issue that a dog might be having. George can throw out ideas like this to help anyone, and our vet care team is usually up for trying different medications to try to help a dog along. So thanks so much for your patience, Melissa, and for
Yeah.
dealing with the potty stuff. That's so hard when they're just so scared.
He's a good boy. He's our first super shy one. Patty's been a real champ of a mentor.
Awesome.
Patty's awesome.
And I think that, I mean, we've taken in dogs from hoarding situations before and dogs from the street. I mean, we see these dogs who have no fur when they come in. And sometimes we have to find an adopter. You know, it's very rare that we can fully hear a dog, you know, from their shyness while they're with us. And I've been amazed at the adopters that we found who, you know, it might take a year, but that dog might be a whole different creature than thanks to the extra love that you provide as a foster home in the beginning.
Thanks, George.
Very good. Thank you. What was it talking about before answering Melissa's question? I can't remember.
We were talking about adolescent dogs and some of the games.
Yes. So adolescent dogs are tough because the whole idea of like development in dogs is really fascinating because they go from being like little puppies where they're exploring the world and they're exploring their environment and surroundings, and then they sort of branch over into this. So there's fear periods in dogs, and fear periods are absolutely normal. We see this with anybody who has a human baby. We see this, you run into a baby at a supermarket, right? And you give them a little wave and you say, "Hi, baby." And then they sort of tuck into mom's shoulder and they go to hide. That's fear period. It's like the stranger danger, we call it, right? And with dogs, we run into the same thing where you might have this really like outgoing, really robust puppy. And then all of a sudden they sort of see like a shopping bag blowing in the wind, or they see like somebody's lawn inflatable for a holiday, or they see a kid on a scooter, and it just sort of like charges this fear, and then they start to show more fear in different places. Now, this fear is a safety mechanism. So imagine dogs, rewind, 3,000 years, right? Where you had these dogs that were, just out in the wild. We had, saber-toothed cats and woolly mammoths and all sorts of crazy animals that are extinct now, but they were alive then. And so imagine a dog being like, a puppy is like, oh, hey, look, in today's world, it would be like a puppy going up to an alligator in Florida. Or, so in these situations, you go back and you see these, imagine a wild dog, a feral, prehistoric dog. If they didn't have this fear period, they would happily go and play with a saber-toothed cat and then get eaten. So this is all for DNA to be passed along and for their survival. So this fear period. So fast forward now to today, and we don't have many scary things, but that fear period is still really alive, very much alive. So these dogs, they develop this fear period, and their fear is like almost, it's mysterious. It's like, why are they scared of plastic bags? Like, we have an understanding of what it is. We know what it is. We can sort of generalize and go, okay, that's a plastic bag. There's nothing to be scared of. But for the dog, it's something very much to be scared of. Now, the big mistake people make is they try to bring the fearful thing closer, or they take the dog and bring it closer to sort of go, look, they try to like rationalize, like, look, it's just somebody's lawn inflatable. It's not a big deal. Like, just go look at it. And that can actually make matters worse. Instead, what we should be doing is we should be feeding the dog treats. So figuring out how far away the dog can tolerate this scary thing. Let's say lawn inflatable. So walking one of your fosters, and all of a sudden they see, I don't know, a big Snoopy inflatable in somebody's lawn. And the dog's like, holy smokes, what the hell is that? And we sort of go, okay, you're scared. I get it. Good. Treat, treat, treat. Now, again, a lot of people will say, going back to the whole idea of like cuddling or paying attention to a dog that's fearful, if we feed it food, we're same thing. They're saying like, why would you reward the fear? You're rewarding the fear. No, you're not. What you're doing is you're pairing the fear with whatever the dog is scared of with food. So they go, hey, this is very interesting. Over time, they start to say, every time we see that thing that I'm normally scared of, the human that's with me, becomes very, very generous and starts giving me lavish praise and lots of treats. that thing can't be that bad. And that's how we get over that little hump of that fear. But that fear can generalize to a lot of different things. You know, all my spring and summer puppies right now, I've a handful of like youngish dogs between 10 weeks and say 5 months old, and I say, go home, crank your AC, put on your winter coat, because I don't want the first time your dog to see a person in a winter coat to be in the winter, right? And we get surprised. We don't think that far ahead to say, oh, my dog is going to have to see people bundled up head to toe with just their eyes. I am shocked with how many dogs are tolerant of masks. You can just chime in, but how many people have had issues with dogs having issues with people wearing masks? Because I haven't seen many, and I'm shocked. I thought for sure, like with COVID, especially early on, when everybody's wearing masks, I thought dogs were going to have an issue with that, but not many dogs I've encountered have had issues with that. We still have issues with beards and hats and other types of things, but for some reason the masks weren't that big of an issue, which I found absolutely fascinating. Sorry, go ahead.
Also, in our puppy adoption folders, we do have a handout. George, I can't remember if it was something that you recommended or Sarah Wiesner did, but we do have a handout on a checklist for puppies on things that adopters should try to expose a puppy to, whether it be a vacuum, somebody in a hat, all that kind of stuff. And of course, it's been a little trickier over the last year with really getting out in the world with the animals as much. I think that's going to get easier, but so with, whether it's the checklist in our adoption folders or whether it's a checklist that we, find online or something on things that you should expose animals to, people in masks, children, all these things. What is, so I know we have the article and I'm not looking at it right now. What is there a certain, is it the adolescent years that like the period there that is the fear period, or when, so we can expose a puppy to a person in a hat, but does it need to be multiple times to really get, or like, is there a certain period we need to be focusing on introducing these puppies to things?
It's really both. So to me, it's like, so I got Dolly when she was 4 months old, and from day one on our walks, regardless if she was showing any fear or whatever, anything new and novel, and I was just guessing, anything new and novel, a big gust of wind came by and she's like, whoa, what was that? Yes, good girl, treat, treat, treat. We saw a cyclist go by. Yes, treat, treat, treat. Rollerblader, cyclist, jogger. I mean, you name it. Kids on scooters. Like I would venture out with Dolly and try to just as long as she's looking at them, and that's the thing too that people forget is we take so many of their moments of tolerance for granted. But yes, it's multiple sessions of exposure. It's not just one. It's not, training and desensitization is not a one-off event. It's repetition. So if you have a friend with a beard, yes, expose them to the person with the beard and make sure you're giving multiple treats and pull out the big stuff: cheese, chicken, turkey, hot dogs, roast beef, and really tell the puppy that anytime we see these things, you're going to get heavily rewarded, so that they have this impression throughout their life that these things are, one, not going to hurt them. And we forget also that the absence of behavior is the behavior we want. So just because a dog isn't showing fear or anxiety or apprehension towards a person or a thing, if you feed them for it, it's not going to do anything. You're not doing anything wrong. You're actually reinforcing the behavior anyway. So we want to reward them for just being cool around stuff. I took it a step farther with Dolly, where I would have, I started with just like a small, like Chinese food container that was like lighter, and I would drop it. So she'd be laying in bed over there. I'd throw it on the ground, and then she'd perk up and I'd throw food at her. And then I moved on to like bigger lids and pots and pans, just to make sort of a lot of noise, because there's, we play Jenga and we play, we do things that are going to make noise. And I want her to sort of like, as any one of us would, right? If we heard tires screeching and we're like, are we waiting for that crash, right? I don't want my dogs to think that loud noises are bad. I want them to know that loud noises happen and it's really not a big deal. So again, rewarding, even though the dog isn't doing anything. And that sort of bleeds into the whole idea of catching your dog being good and teaching what is yes. You know, like in those moments, like I say this a lot, where did you eat that whole bully stick? Come up here. So in those moments where you know, you're hanging out watching a movie, you kicked off your shoes or your slippers and you're hanging out on the couch, and then you know your young dog walks in, picks up an appropriate chewy and goes and lays in a dog bed, and you know you don't get a second one. That's crazy town. You know, goes and lays in a dog bed and chews on an appropriate toy. Nobody says anything. Meanwhile, that's exactly what you want to be rewarding. You want to reward those moments when the dog is making good choices and offering favorable behaviors, right? Catch your dog being good. And the same thing for desensitization. I love the idea of that checklist where, you know, you come up with just wacky stuff and it's like a scavenger hunt, you know, like take your puppy down to, you know, adolescent dog. If they're not super fearful or scared and they're just sort of average and they're just of average sort of emotional stature, you know, like they can handle some stuff, head down to State Street. Maybe not State Street if it's too busy for them and there's too many cars. Maybe be on a side street, but just definitely go for walks and have people interact. And you know, anytime they, you know, your puppy sees something a little bit novel, just don't worry. Even if they're not fearful of it, feed them treats because they are making associations. One thing I often talk about is the idea of a puppy or a dog's brain. A dog's brain, if you imagine bookshelves, sort of like Harry Potter bookshelves, lots and lots of bookshelves with all of their behaviors, the good, the bad, and the ugly. All their behaviors: sit down, stay, come, roll over, play dead, and chase the cat, go in the trash, jump on the counter, steal the chicken, you know, eat poop, eat garbage. Like all the behaviors are there. Now those behaviors are all in like these little ugly, gaudy, cheaply made piggy banks, right? Now, every time the dog does something naughty and they get something, right, stealing food off the counter or chasing the cat, and they get this little surge of adrenaline, and that's reinforcing for them. So we want to make sure that we're filling the piggy banks that are favorable, right? Sit down, stay, come, roll over, play dead. We put money in those piggy banks. Those behaviors take on value, very much like a change jar you would have at home, right? You take your loose change from your pocket, you put it in your change jar. Over time, that change jar accrues in value. So same thing with behaviors. Dogs will do behaviors that have been rewarded. So what we want to do is we don't want to put any money in those naughty piggy banks. We want to deliver consequences, appropriate, sweet punishments, but we want to focus on those good behaviors. Now, in that same breath, the scavenger hunt for desensitization is also true. So in that long list, like find a mom with a double wide stroller, find somebody that's really tall, find somebody wearing a baseball cap, find somebody with a very, very big beard, find kids on scooters, find, you know, it's a scavenger hunt that you go on with your foster, and it really opens up the idea of exposing them to things that they're going to see in their daily life, right? Go find a UPS man, FedEx man, Amazon man, go find these delivery people, you know, and even just walking down State Street and just having people sort of interact with your dog and say, hey, would you mind giving my dog a treat? And they give them a treat. That's valuable. That is going to build a very beautiful and strong, emotionally strong dog.
Awesome. What other issues are you guys having with any foster dogs that have been through your homes lately? I guess something I've seen more when I look at training requests, there's obviously training requests that come in that are, oh, actually, Siler.
There we go.
Okay, hi, this is Siler.
Hi, Siler.
So one of the things that I've noticed, we've done puppies a couple of times, not a ton. And part of that is that our older dog, Mickey, doesn't know how to play with dogs. And so puppies just like aren't great. But one of the things that we've noticed is that he doesn't correct them. He just runs away from them. So like, he's not the kind of dog that's going to correct them. And I'm wondering, like, are there things that like humans can do to help correct that behavior if the dog won't? So usually we just, like, once he gets overwhelmed, we just separate and give him space, right? But I don't know if there's things we can do.
What's the puppy's name?
So this is just, we don't currently have a puppy.
Oh.
But in our experience with puppies, like that's one thing we noticed is like my dog doesn't try to correct them. He just leaves.
Okay, gotcha. So he doesn't prefer the company of puppies.
He doesn't prefer the companies of dogs. Really.
Dogs or puppies?
Both.
Okay.
Like he likes sniffing them, and then he would prefer if they left.
Okay.
That's it.
Does he have any dog friends?
He has one dog friend who also doesn't like other dogs. So they see each other and they get really excited and they wag their tails. And then we ask them if they want to say hi. And then they're like, nope. And they just like walk next to each other.
Introverts unite.
Right.
So, in these situations, I always measure it two ways. One is, I never ever, one of the biggest things that drives me crazy is when I hear people say, oh, just let them work it out. You wouldn't let 2 3-year-olds with scissors work it out. Because somebody's going to get bit, and it's not fair for what's your house dog's name? Mickey. So it's not fair to Mickey to have, dogs. We know, Mickey's personality, how to, who Mickey is. How long have you had Mickey?
About 3 years.
Yeah. So you definitely know him, right?
Mhm.
So it's not fair to put Mickey in a situation where he has to police anybody. He's told you, he's just like, I really don't want this and I don't like this. I get that you like it and that's cool with you, but like when these dogs are here, I prefer them not in my personal space. So we have to honor that to a certain degree, right?
Yep.
So in those situations when there's another dog, working the chill out game is going to be godsend, because the dog that you're working is going to be on leash and you'll be able to control that dog, which will also allow Mickey a little bit more freedom and not have him sort of evade and leave the area. So chill out is one of my favorites for this, because the dog that you have, whether it be a puppy or a dog, they can come out of their crate or after you've taken them out to potty, and you can put them in a chill out. They're on leash, and that will give Mickey the ability to sort of regulate how close or far he is. And you can also reward Mickey for having come closer. So while you're working the dog in a chill out, are you familiar with the chill out game, Tyler?
Yep. We do it a lot.
Awesome. So while you're working that dog in a chill out, you can also pitch treats to Mickey and reward him for coming closer and investigating and sort of wanting to hang out. And by proxy, you're also rewarding the fact that he's closer to a dog. That's the big takeaway. I also, I learned a lot from my dog Charity when I was still in New York. And one of the things I learned was like, Charity was chill with dogs. She didn't like them in her face. She would give them a little air snap and they'd shoo off. And I stopped boarding. I would do boarding trains and board my clients' dogs in New York. And I stopped boarding, and she sort of just like blossomed, and she was playing with her brothers and sisters, and she was, running around, and she like was really spry. And I try to remind people too, like if you have a house dog, making sure that they actually enjoy the company of the dogs and taking breaks from boarding or fostering or having that interaction. And even a week or two in between fosters can really help them acclimate and help them chill. And it'll give you a good sense of like what they're feeling, just giving them that little break in between fosters, and making sure that you also do things independent. So like if you have a foster dog now, one of the big things that I'm pushing is a lot of rest and making sure you're doing 2 types of crate training when you're home and crate training when you're not home. And that means crating a dog, and then you go out for a walk with Mickey and make sure you have that quality and special time with him so that he feels like he's still getting time with you and time and that special time with his parent.
Awesome. Thanks.
You got it. Patty said, several adopters are asking about recommendations for training classes. We always mention you, George, but what about classes? Can you suggest trainers we can recommend to our adopters? Come May 4th, hang on one second. I was about to do a big release on this, and I was going to mention it to you too, Lauren. Just let me make sure I have the right date.
That's pretty soon.
Yeah. So May, hang on, I'm just pulling up the calendar. So starting probably May 9th, starting probably May 9th, I'm gonna start offering semi group classes on my property. So it'll be, and I'm putting everything together now. So it's gonna be probably 4 or 5 dogs in my dog run, and then, you know, socially distanced, and people come, bring their own camping chairs, bring their own treats. Everybody's going to be separate. We'll probably allow the dogs to play a little bit. I'm not sure about that yet. But I will be having classes on my property. My only big concern with this is like weather permitting. So I might do
Right.
something if the class, if people have to be understanding of the weather, because that's totally out of anybody's control. And then the classes will just get pushed back, you know, so doing something along those lines where I'd probably send them videos to begin with, and then when they come, we'll just jump in and do like 4 to 5 week sessions, probably 4-week sessions where we just do like crash course basic obedience, and we just really tackle all the basic stuff. And then we'll, if we have dogs that are fearful or nervous or have any behavioral issues, we'll deal with those dogs independently. But I will be putting something out regarding classes on my property very soon.
Good. You have it on your website?
No, I'll probably, I was actually going to mention to Lauren, we should update what's on the website, of the Underdog website. And we'll just refresh it with what I'm going to be offering.
Cool.
Okay.
Like if there were to be, like, obviously we recommend you first. Let's say there was somebody on the west side who was not able and willing to make it out. Are there any places in town that you might think are like, because we obviously want rewards-based, positive-based classes.
Yep.
And I think, you know, some people can argue that like just about any dog could, you know, out of a basic obedience class, it can be good for bonding and for, you know, establishing a good relationship. Are there any places around town that you think are positive based that if somebody wasn't able to make it out to you, that you might think would be an acceptable option?
Anybody I'd recommend would be over here on the east side that does group classes. I don't know much about what's offered on the west side. On the east side, and I don't know if anybody has like a satellite location that does classes. So I recommend like I love Laura Strimple Taproot. She has North Paws LLC off of Flom. I love Dog Den, and I love who the hell's the other one?
Dog's best friend, maybe?
Dog's Best Friend. Thank you, Patty. Yeah, I mean, those are my go-tos. If I had to recommend a group class environment, that's who people that don't want to do virtual appointments with me and must have a group class, that's who I've been recommending.
Awesome. Thank you. I think that's helpful because I know, you know, it's just good to know when people are also returning animals like Patty's role, to know what places are positive based, because sometimes you take it with a grain of salt if the dog was in a class that had negative punishment or
Right.
what
Positive punishment.
positive punishment. So thank you.
Look how
Leela.
big she got.
Oh my gosh.
Look at this mug. I love her. I'm gonna keep her. I'm gonna take her to my group class. Layla, you have your hand raised.
Hi.
How
So
are you?
Leela's here. She doesn't want to be on camera. So that's my daughter, Leela. I'm Jen.
Oh, hi,
McDowell.
Jen.
I'm the mom. So we have Smiley, and we swapped with someone. We swapped Chip for Smiley because Smiley had a problem with their resident dog.
Right,
And she's
we
doing
spoke.
yeah, we did, totally. And she's just doing a really nice job overall. She's been just really sweet, and she loves belly rubs, and she's, you know, she's just a really nice dog. She's only our third foster, and I've actually never owned dogs in my whole life. So the thing that we don't know, take her out, she wants to go out. And she even knows how to go out. She's standing by the door right now, wagging her tail. Like, I want to go out, please. We're not sure about walking her. She's a big girl, and we bought a harness for her. And the other 2 dogs that we had already were leash trained. So she doesn't show like reactivity. Like she's not scared. She doesn't lunge. She just wants to like go, right? She just wants to like, she's just interested in everything. And so we tried like some high value treats like hot dogs and cheese, which inside she absolutely loves. Like she like dances her little paws and will like sit, lay down. But as soon as we take her out the door, it's like she will like not even look for treats. She like doesn't seem interested in. Before we tried the hot dogs and cheese, we just had like, I don't know, whatever kind of treats, and she would just spit them out. It was like she would like, you'd put it by her mouth and she'd ignore it or just spit it. So I guess I'm not sure. Like we've tried just kind of going, we live in a cul-de-sac, which is kind of nice. So we can just
Mhm.
kind of practice by walking just around the cul-de-sac and coming back in. So I don't know.
So is your struggle, I just want to make sure I'm hearing you clearly. So your struggle is that she just pulls on leash.
Yeah,
What does Smiley do when she's, it's a she, right?
yeah, she's a girl. Yeah.
Good. So what happens when she sees a dog on leash? Does she become reactive or?
No, she in fact, I just took her out and we have a dog neighbor and the dog barked and she barked back like twice and then kind of looked over, her tail kind of went up and then she was done. Then she kind of moved on. So sometimes she cries, sometimes she sees a dog and she'll whine and cry. She'll like stop and cry,
Mhm.
but she doesn't like go for that. She's not scared. It doesn't seem like.
Okay, that's good. Now,
Yeah.
this is going, did you hear what I said before about the whole idea of rewarding a dog, even if you're not seeing a behavior, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that, so it's been a while since I've had a brand new pup, and that's, my little Dolly. So from 4 months from when I got her, any walk we would go on, anytime we saw something novel, be it another dog or whatever, I did the same treatment I would for reactivity. And that is every time we see a dog, I would say, "Oh, do you see the puppy?" And she would see the dog. And then I would say, "Do you see the puppy?" And she would look up at me and I go, "Yes, treat, 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 treat." And using super high value stuff. What I got from that is now she's a year old. And when we go for walks, when she sees a dog, her immediate response is to check in with me. It's a scavenger hunt. She finds a dog, and then she comes to me like, "Pay up, I found another one." Right? Which is lovely. It takes away the frustration from dogs. So I'm happy that she's not really barking and lunging at dogs, but that's something I would implement anyway, is anytime she sees a dog or something novel, reward. Do you see the,
Okay.
and then say what it is in a happy voice and give her some food.
Yep. So the
Now-
food part, she does, that's the part we're kind of having struggle, like outside.
I'm
Inside
a-
she will. Okay, go ahead.
And I'm going to touch on that too, because that's also incredibly relevant. So there's something I do called a consent test with dogs. And that is the idea of, if your dog will not eat something like chicken, cheese, turkey, roast beef, hot dog, and you're offering this to them and they're like, that tells you that mentally they're over threshold. They're that aroused that they're not eating it. It'd be like me saying to you, Jen, if I said, what's a food you could eat 3 square a day that you could eat all the time? What is it?
Yeah, pasta.
Pasta. All right.
Or like Thai food.
Thai
Thai
food. All
food.
right.
Yeah.
Imagine your favorite dish in Thai cuisine. So imagine if you were doing some banking, right? You went to the bank and then all of a sudden somebody came in with a gun, was robbing the bank. And I came out of like the ATM and I was like, "Hey, you want some Thai food?" Right? You'd be like, "I freaking love Thai food, but not right now, George. I'd like to live." So I'm not saying that she's feeling like fight or flight or that but it's that high of an emotional place that she's in where she's outside and she's like really aroused, really, really hyper aroused. So what I would recommend you do with her is 1, play the games with her, the It's Your Choice elevator game, chill out. Number 2, introduce tug of war, that arousal game we talked about at the top of the hour. The arousal, right? I call it synthetic arousal, but technically arousal is arousal, regardless of what kind it is. And in those moments where she's not eating these super high valuable treats, it's telling that she's like over threshold. Her mind is checked out. She's like focusing on whatever she's focusing on. We're also dealing with springtime, like spring fever, I call it. Like there's rabbit pee and rabbit poo everywhere, and there's all sorts of smells. The earth is warm, and there's a lot of big smells. So she's just like frantic about sniffing everything and taking it all in. So the big component here we want to take away is by causing arousal and training, you're going to slowly start to get her to perform better when she's aroused. We have to teach dogs how to think when they're aroused. I made this comparison before this. I mean, I think this has always been an issue, but like right now in the the social injustice that police are dealing with, right? A lot of this has to do with them not having enough training, right? They have to perform traffic stops, right? And this is part of the respect I have for police officers, that they don't know which car they're pulling over. Like, that person could have a weapon, that person could hurt them, and that cop just wants to go home to their family at night. And in those moments, like, they're dealing with arousal when they're chasing a suspect. And I say this too about police dogs, where I've seen police videos where the police dog handler is telling the dog that the dog has already apprehended the suspect and biting and holding, and the handler saying "Oost, oost," which is German and Schützen for release, release, and the dog's not releasing. That's poor training, and in my opinion, that's also police brutality. It's like, this dog is not responding to a command. So, all this said, when a dog is aroused, they're less likely to perform. So we have to make sure that we are teaching them how to think and perform when they're aroused. So I go to a buddy of mine who did bomb disposal in the military, and I'm fascinated by his stories. And he came back 10 fingers, 10 toes, and he's home safe and sound, which I'm very happy for. And he told me, he's like, in training, they put us in a room, and it's like, it's a sterile room. The bomb is a paint bomb. It's not a real bomb. And when we first are learning how to figure out what this thing is, because it just looks like it's a mess. It's like, it just looks like somebody put this together in their basement, which they did. And then all of a sudden you have to figure it out. And if it's a good bomb maker, then they have trip fails and fail safeties and all this other stuff that they have to be able to decipher. They don't do this the first day on the job, right? They don't go, "Okay, Billy, it's your first day. Go on, figure that one out." They do this in a classroom setting where they have all this sort of patience and silence, and they can actually concentrate and think. And then they start to introduce distractions. So over loudspeakers, they start playing distractions, traffic sounds, machine gun fire, whatever it is that they're going to have to train and work in. And it's a process. And we should do the same exact thing for our dogs, where so at home, you play the It's Your Choice elevator game, Chill Out, and then you start incorporating that tug of war. And I want you to push that tug to see where her failure is. So you play tug, 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 and then you go right into a game. And what we want to see is really quick performance. So it goes from arousal to focus, being able to play the game perfectly. And if she's able to do that, then I want you to tug more. I want you to find her failure. And I always quote Bob Ross for this because he's fantastic. There are no mistakes, just happy little accidents. When we're training, that's when we want to make all of our beautiful mistakes, because that's how we learn. So you're going to see when you tug, 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 there'll be a limit where she does well. And then there'll be that extra 5 to 10 seconds of tug that sort of flips the switch. And she's like, I'm crazy now. And that's what we're looking for, because that's what's going to cause her to not eat the food. So play tug, get her silly crazy, and then start incorporating that into your training so that you can sort of take that will carry over into the street. Pay attention to how much food she's eating in those moments where, oh, wow, she wouldn't normally eat treats in this moment. This is good. The other thing I'd mention is withholding meals. So, and I don't mean entirely, I mean just do it after. So if she eats breakfast, say at 8 a.m., feed her after her morning walk. So take her for her walk, right? I have a chef friend that says hunger makes the best sauce, right? So she'll be more likely to eat these super high value treats on her walks, and then doing the training in respects to the arousal work. The arousal work is so super important.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, actually. So everything you're saying, I'm a special ed teacher by training. I'm a general ed trainer now, but
awesome.
I mean, it's very similar to teaching children, right? Like small children. It's kind of a lot of what you're saying makes a lot of sense to me.
I went to school to get my cognitive behavioral therapist license.
There you go. Awesome. It makes a lot of sense. So thank you. That's very helpful.
Right.
I appreciate it.
It'd be the same thing with, a child that's autistic that has
absolutely
sensory issues. You're not going to just throw them in a pile of mulch, right? You're going to ease into it. You're going to let them hold a piece of mulch, and then you're going to have them step on it with a sock on, and then step on it with a bare foot. It's that slow desensitization.
Yep. It totally makes sense. So thank you so much.
Brilliant.
Awesome.
You know more than you think you do on this topic then. All right, wonderful questions. Did something else come in the chat? Nope, somebody went back to work. Good.
If there's any other questions, please raise your hand. Otherwise, I always have things that kind of come to mind. And I think we have this blacked out until 7:30, so I'll just at least ask this next one. George, do you have any, we talked about this in a number of ways, but any like hot tips for best introductions with your own dogs? So, I mean, I used to start all the underdogs out at my old house. I would just open the crates, let them in my yard. My dogs kind of knew what to do. And I mean, I was lucky and it worked out, but that's obviously not the right way to do it. So do you have any tips for making sure that we're keeping our pets safe
Yeah.
when introducing them?
I think you hit the nail on the head too. Like, you know, Siler said that they know their dog, right? And it's so super important to know that. It's not going in blind. It's almost like what I tell people if they have a puppy and they see, like, the rule is I don't allow puppies to meet dogs on the street, because, or you ask a very specific question. You say, does your dog love and adore puppies? Because my puppy's a lot and he can be a bit of a handful. And if that person answers with anything other than, yeah, my dog loves puppies, if they say something like, yeah, for the most part, no, don't let them meet, because that could be dangerous, because they don't even know their dog. They don't know if they're going to be okay with the pup. So no. So yes, know your dog, number one. Number two, if we have the luxury, so there's obviously that moment of like dogs in the crate. Are you still allowing people to bathe them at Underdog?
Yeah, it isn't happening as much since we have more limited hours for volunteers to come in.
So one thing I would do is, again, take the time. So especially for your house dog, we want to honor and respect your house dogs. So number one is when you take the puppy or dog off of transport, have a towel, like a small little hand towel, and wipe it all over the dog, especially on genitalia and around the face, head, and neck. Keep the dog in the crate, go in the house, and allow your dog to go crazy on this towel. Let them sniff the towel, let them take that in, because we are sort of fast forwarding an introduction here. After your house dog has sniffed and sort of taken in that smell of the towel, it's not going to be so crazy when they actually meet the dog. They're like, oh, the towel smells like this dog. And they'll also start to learn that first I smell a towel, then a new dog comes. So it's not a cold water in the face for your house dog. Second thing I like to do is take your house dog and put your house dog away and allow the foster to come in on leash, because we don't know bathroom habits and we don't know how they're going to act. Bring your foster dog on leash and let them explore the household. Every single room, as much time as it takes. Make sure your dog has a yummy stuffed Kong or a Chewy of some sort in whatever room they're in. And then you take the foster dog around the kitchen, around the living room. And again, the personality of the foster is also going to dictate how this proceeds, because if you have a super hyper fearful dog, they're going to be sort of just trembling and not knowing what's going on. In that case, you carry them in, chuck them in a crate, and let them decompress. But if you have a young, spry, young dog that, you know, comes off transport and they're like, I'm here to party, then give them that time to just sort of sniff around the house. Let them sniff around your yard. If you have the luxury of a nice fenced in backyard, allow them to, with a leash dragging, allow them to wander the backyard a little bit. Your dog is safe and sound in whatever bedroom you put him in. After a little bit, now you swap roles. You take the foster dog, you put him in the crate, you allow that dog to come out. Now that foster dog has put all its scent particles all over the house. And then you allow your dog to sort of sniff around the house behind them, because there might be stuff that they're smelling that wasn't on the towel. And that's cool. You know, let them sniff around, let them explore. At that point, if you have an extra set of hands, you take the foster dog or you take your dog outside. If you trust your dog and know that your dog, your personal dog your house dog is really good with other dogs, then they can be off leash so that you can control the foster dog. You go into your yard, and this is me assuming that you have a fenced in yard. If you don't have a fenced in yard, obviously both dogs would have to be on leash. I'd prefer if the house dog is on a longer line, like a 25-foot leash, so that they can have the ability to move away from the foster dog if they wish. At that point, you sort of allow for a normal introduction, as loose of leash as possible so that they can do their normal greeting ritual. The normal greeting ritual should be dogs approach, they go nose to nose, and at the last second, they do this little arc. So if this is overhead view, they come here, they sniff, and they do a little arc. And that little arc that they do is they start sniffing, they sniff the head and neck area here, and then they go to the back end. Name, rank, serial number, sex. Oh, you're neutered male. Oh, you just got neutered. They decide what's going to happen, and then that's when you sort of see. Now, the big part here that I see and I talk about a lot. People call me and they say, I don't know what happened. Like his tail was wagging, and then he just went after the other dog. Well, tail wag is so super important to understand because there's 7 different carriages. That's the placement of the tail. So way up over the back and trembling, bad. Any tremble, any location of the carriage, and if the tail is trembling and just moving like a rattlesnake, bad, bad, bad. Separate, separate, separate. So over the back means I'm being a little bit more, I'm posturing more. That you'll see that dog with the tail like this, head up, chin over their shoulders. You're going to see a lot more of that pushy sort of forward behavior. As the carriage goes back and down underneath the dog, so like, you know, the tail's tucked, and if it's a female, it looks like they have a penis, like the tail's coming between their legs. In that situation, the lower the tail, the more submissive. If it's still trembling, it's still showing that they're anxious. Now, what we're looking for here is big bushy tail wag from the base of the tail. So you want to see if this is the base of the tail, you want to see the tail stroking like you know, grass in the wind from the base of the root of the tail. You want to see it going back and forth quickly or not. And we prefer if the tail would be parallel to the body, or a little bit above or a little bit lower. A little bit lower shows sign of submission. A little bit higher just shows a little bit more confidence. And that's not bad either. But so long as it's really big and bushy, wagging from the base. You want to see pitter patter movement. Anything still and rigid, not good. Separate. Introduce space. I also very much like doing the touch and go. So they come in, they do that nose, neck sniff, they go to the butts. You say, woohoo, good dogs. Pull them away, feed, 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 feed. Give them a second to sort of reset, and then do that same introduction again. Take your time. There's no rush. There's absolutely zero rush whatsoever. And what we do is we sort of sit there, we go, okay, let's see what happens. Then we just sit there and watch. And we want to just, we have to be there as the aides on the playground to regulate how this introduction goes. And even if you're wrong, I'd rather you be wrong than right. Be like, I knew that was going to happen. Well, then why'd you let them continue, right? Separate, separate, separate. So once you have them separated, feed them some treats. You're looking for some nice behavior, sort of like the dog's like sort of perky. You want to see pitter patter feet, right? Pitter patter feet are always good. They're like sort of, they're sort of moving around happy. You want to look for those play bows. Everybody knows what a play bow is, right? Forearms of the dog on the floor, butt in the air, tail wagging. Big play display. And you want to see a lot of touch and go. And then if you see them sort of mirroring each other, be a little bit more relaxed, but don't let it go too long. Separate, feed, 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 and let everybody catch their breath, and then allow them again. There is no rush. Take your time.
And I think when George says there's no rush, there's some nights that you bring home a dog and they're just going to be separated, you know, for a day or more.
Yeah.
You kind of have to follow that body language and trust your gut if you don't think it's going to go well. Just it's not abuse to keep the dog crated or to, you know, leave one of your dogs out and your dog out and the foster dog crated. So just kind of follow their cues. And so do you have concerns, George, if Diane asked if like the foster dog, when you're doing the tour of the house on leash, if that dog pees in the house, do you think that that's going to be taken poorly by the resident dog?
There's always that chance, but you know, again, thinking logically, chances are you're going to try to allow them to potty before coming in. But again, a urine mark is a urine mark. You know, like a dog always has that extra little squirt in them. You know, like they always have that reserved little pee in them. So I mean, the chances of them marking, like one is to notice when they're going to mark. So you'll notice male dogs will first, well, let's ask this question to everybody. What's the first thing a male dog does when they go outside to pee? What do they look for?
A bush, a stick, a tree, a slightly longer blade of grass, a
So
post.
All right, you answered it, but not totally. Give me the real answer there. Anything vertical out of the ground, right? And then the male dog walks up to it and goes, "Is that a lefty or a righty?" Yeah, it's definitely a lefty, right? And they decide to pee on it. So if you notice that you have a male dog, because a female dog might mark a little higher or on something, but it's less likely. You'll see this more with male dogs, but I'm not excluding female dogs from urine marking. Female dogs can absolutely urine mark. But if you see the male dog walk up to something and tilt their head and sniff with their head tilted, that's an indicator of them about to pee on something. When dogs are sniffing something that they want to just sniff, it's straight on, they're sniffing with their nose down. When they're about to urine mark, they tilt their head a little bit, and that's the indicator of which direction they're going to go and mark on it. And it's generally something vertical. It's going to be your entertainment center. It's going to be the arm of a couch, a chair, a table. It's going to be something vertical out of the ground. So just watch them very carefully. If you notice them do like that little sniff and they're turning their body like they're about to lift a leg to go pee, just pull them away and don't, intervene. Don't just allow them to do it. Now, would it affect your resident dog? Absolutely. There's going to be pee on something and they're like, she never lets me pee in the house, So you do want to interrupt it, but just, accidents happen, like for a foster to have a genuine accident or not, I'm sure that anybody here that has a dog has had a foster have an accident in the house. Has it ruined anything? Probably not.
And there are belly bands at the office, which some people like to use some people have rules at their house where the first few days a new male dog needs to wear a belly band. I found those to be good tools. And if you ever don't see the right size in the basement, I'm always happy to order more. Do you have any concerns about using those, George?
No.
It just provides less cleanup. You can put like a pad, like a sanitary napkin in them too, to make them last longer, so you don't have to wash them every time if you do have a big peer. They changed my life. I had never heard of them, and then it really helped when I had a lot of fosters.
Belly bands are awesome.
And George, can you look in the chat?
Yeah, I was doing that before, but I couldn't do two things. Following this routine for foster dog, we did that one, what Diane asked, and then Siler asked, we usually keep our fosters in a separate room. They get that room, and our resident dog doesn't ever get to go in there. I guess I'm wondering if intros are still helpful then. We sometimes never intro. Other times we intro after like 3 days. Yeah, but with Mickey, you were saying like he just doesn't like the company of dogs. It's really nice when you have like I remember Bear. Bear was just like, come to me, my friends. And you have dogs that do that. They're just like, they're happy. Like they're just like. It's like they have this. You have like this hotel, and like these dogs come and visit for a little while. They make friends, and then they send them off. And I think there's a huge part of the foster dog that heals and gets better faster when they have a good role model. Just like we have mentors for our new fosters, the dogs play that role for the foster dogs that are coming in, and they're like, your house dog, if they're like this happy-go-lucky dog, in essence what they do is they're like, and look over here, this is our toy bin, and this is where we get to have all these toys. And then she gives us at like 3 o'clock, she'll give us a Kong, and then it'll have yummy things in it. And then like I think that our resident dogs do so much of training and sort of helping them sort of become established within the household and help the decompression process. And again, I'm talking about the dogs that come up that are just a little more happy-go-lucky, a little rambunctious, a little bit silly. This isn't about the fearful dogs or the dogs that have some behavior stuff going on. I think that the resident dogs play a huge role, but with Mickey Siler, it's that idea like he doesn't like dogs. So I think that's an appropriate way to do it for Mickey's sake, is just keeping your foster separate. If that works for you and your household, that's wonderful.
Awesome. Do we have any other last minute questions? George, did you have anything else you wanted to touch on that kind of came to mind as we were talking about the other stuff?
No, just really just the two big things are, one, from the moment you get your foster, really put in that effort to try not to let them tug at your heartstrings. And if you're going to let them tug at your heartstrings, let it be followed by training. You know, play those games, play those 3 games, and really build that bond as quickly as possible. Allow for decompression. Like those are the big takeaways from any new foster coming in. The other thing I wanted to mention is Lauren and I are going to be on the Larry Mueller show on Tuesday. So are you going to put something out about that?
Yeah.
Today is
I
Tuesday.
actually. What?
Tuesday, right?
Today is Tuesday.
I think it might be. It's either next week or the week after. So I'll post something about it for sure.
Okay.
It's the 27th.
Yeah. Oh, cool. So yeah, next week. So I'll post something about that. And also kind of like what George was saying, and I think he's talked about it in other calls that we've done, but just it's so tempting to take in an animal and give them Disneyland right away because we feel so bad for them. But there's a lot of value in, okay, so they came from a shelter where it wasn't great. Before that, it might have been even worse, where maybe they were abused or neglected or just didn't have the kind of life we want dogs to have. Even if your dogs have a Disneyland type life at home where they get a bully stick every day and they get to go to the dog park and go to classes and all that stuff, it's not a bad idea to, your foster dogs can just not be allowed on the couch if you have, it's hard with Chihuahuas to prevent that, but to have it be kind of like you're a step along the way where you're so much better than being at the shelter, but let the fosters be Disneyland. And or let the adopters be Disneyland.
Yeah.
It helps the bond with the person. And also you don't know, like if you let dogs sleep in bed with you, the adopter might not. So then that would be like a shelter, your house, adopter's house. And we want it to just kind of be all up.
Right. I think that's a great point.
I'm not saying that there's a hard and fast rule, like with Underdog as a foster, you can't let dogs sleep in your bed or anything like that. But just think about that in the daily things that you do with your foster dogs. Just let it be an ongoing upward ramp of goodness in their lives. And sometimes setting those standards of, hey, you can't come on the couch foster dog can help with some other behavioral issues that could arise otherwise.
I've had people that adopt dogs from Underdog, and they choose me for training, and they're like, we don't want to use any human food, and it's like, oh, like, good to know. Like a lot of people, again, the tugging at the heartstrings, it's like you give your dog a little bit of, your scrap of pizza or whatever, and it seems like it's harmless, but if these dogs go into a household, like Lauren said, like, oh, we don't want dogs on the couch, or we don't want dogs in our bed, or we don't want, like, if the dog already had that privilege in the previous home, it's a behavior that's been reinforced that they're going to try to get. And people have returned dogs for less. So if this dog is incessantly trying to get in the bed or trying to jump on the couch, and, people return dogs for silly things. We know that. So being firm but fair, but still loving, like you can still give a dog privileges and give them a lot of love, but give them the structure that they need to make them harder to return. Because if they go with a bunch of nice behaviors, like laying at your feet and being able to sit and waiting for their food and whatever else you want to train up, that dog is less likely to be returned. Big return is house training. People do not want dogs peeing and pooping in their house. Larger the dog, the bigger the problem.
Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you for all your expertise and another fun night, George.
Happy to be here.
And thanks for coordinating this, Jolene.
Thank you, Jolene.
If as usual, if anyone has any concerns or if you have mentees who have concerns, always open up that training request. It's really good for us to have that information on file. And to, of course, connect you with George and get all the training that you need to help. And every foster we have, we learn a little bit more. So always be sure to send any questions my way, any ideas for training seminars at Lauren@underdogpetrescue.org. And then we can always use that as fodder for ideas for the next topics that we talk about. So hope you all have a good night. Thanks for being here, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.